Greetings, my friends. I just saw something and I felt it would be beneficial to you to share it and entertaining. Now, I was flipping through the channels and the TV show Supergirl was on, and now a year or two ago I was flipping through the channels and this show Supergirl was on, and I tried to watch it, but the whole episode was about some lesbian love story, so I pretty much tuned out. But now I decided to stop and stay on this episode. Now, before I talk about what happened in this episode, which may shock some of you, I grew up watching those Christopher Reeve Superman movies on VHS tapes that were taped off the TV. I absolutely loved them. I loved the character of Superman. That's about the only fantasy character that I actually like. And these newer versions of Superman and some of these superheroes with the dark costumes, especially Superman wearing a dark costume, to me, that's not Superman, because I love the vibrancy and how bright the costume was in those original Christopher Reeve movies, or the Superboy TV show from the early 90s, if you've ever seen that. That's a very good show. Free of any kind of propaganda. It was just a good superhero adventure show. And wearing that bright costume, which reflects the bright, optimistic outlook that character has. And Supergirl, I've never been a fan of. It's just basically a copy of something that guys had. So girls, of course, they have to copy it instead of coming up with something original. But I even have a Supergirl doll up there that I bought last year in the United States. That was on sale at Walmart, and I thought it was so pretty with the colors of the costume. And it was so cheap, I figured, well, I'll pick this up and bring it back as a gift for my niece. But then I didn't see her for a while, and my wife was pregnant at the time, and I thought, well, if I have a girl, maybe I'm going to want to give this to my daughter someday. And I thought, aside from that, I just kind of like it myself. It's just kind of cute, even if I'm not that into the character. But anyways, I was flipping through the channels, and I decided to stop on the episode of Supergirl that was on today, because it was on this scene and they had Nazis in it. And it's not that I'm in love with Nazis or Nazism or anything like that, but part of it was I was quite shocked because TV's become so politically correct that I'm shocked that they would actually show swastikas on TV, because things, even if it's in a historical context, they don't want to show, like, especially if it's the Confederate flag. It's like we can't even talk about history, and we certainly can't present history in a realistic, true manner anymore. Everything has to be presented with a certain angle, and it has to become propaganda. But I was fascinated that they would actually show swastikas on TV. Now, I know, of course, this is a modern TV show and a very liberal TV show, obviously. I know these are going to be evil guys, obviously. They're the bad guys, and as the way they're presented in any American movie or TV show. But part of the other reason I stopped on it, this was clearly kind of a fantasy version of Nazis. Now, it's always a fantasy version of Nazis if it's in a movie or TV show. But it was clear that it's some kind of alternative universe, so they're not dressed the way Nazis were really dressed. They have costumes on, so it's some sort of alternate universe. I can kind of show you a picture, actually. And it turns out the superheroes were there in this alternate version. Let me just shrink this down for you. In this alternate version, they have Nazi superheroes. So let's take a look. There you can see Supergirl. They have a Nazi Supergirl, and instead of the S on her chest, she has the SS symbols. But you can see here, it's kind of interesting the way it's presented. These guys they're completely covered in these black bodysuits, and it's just I just thought it was kind of interesting, and I wanted to see how this played out. So I continue watching. They cut to commercial. And when they come back from commercial on this show, the Nazis are not on the show anymore. There's a different scene. It turns out it's a party because apparently the Flash is getting married the next day. So they're at this party, and the superheroes, they're all drinking, getting drunk. There's a couple lesbians hooking up. The Flash is getting married to a black woman, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, or I'm not saying I'm against that, but what I am saying is it's surprising. Now, maybe the Flash just wants to make sure his kids have fast genes, so he's doing everything he can to pass the speed on to his children by marrying maybe a fast woman. But marrying a black woman, like I said, it's not that there's anything wrong with that, but it does seem extremely unrealistic and staged, as anytime you see these situations in TV shows, because of course they have to force the multiculturalism into it. Now, I went to college in Michigan, which is a state that had a lot of that has a lot of black people, and that's coming from North Dakota. North Dakota at that time, not anymore, but at that time was almost all white people. So I went from a place where basically everyone was white to Michigan, where a large percentage of the population, my university, were black. And one thing I learned very quickly about black people is, even though you'll see a lot of black men dating white women, it's extremely rare that you'll see a black woman dating a white man. Not because the white men are necessarily against it, but black women, a lot of them, they will tell you themselves they do not want to date white men. They don't find white guys attractive for a reason. So it's extremely rare that you see a white guy with a black woman. It's almost as rare as seeing a white woman with an Asian man. Those are two combinations that, for whatever reason, it's extremely uncommon. It's like when you see one, it's like, oh, I've spotted the unicorn. So it doesn't really come off as very believable seeing this dork and the Flash in this version of the Flash. He's this dopey white guy, and he's going to marry this beautiful black woman. And the whole thing comes off as silly and staged. So we have all the superheroes drinking, getting drunk. You see lesbians hooking up at the party. The Flash, he's going to marry a black woman. And then they get to a scene of Green Arrow, and he's with his girlfriend, this blonde girl. And this is probably the most realistic looking couple that you actually see on this show. And it comes down to, it's a very tender scene, and Green Arrow, he actually proposes to his girlfriend. And what does she say? Is she thrilled to get a proposal from this hunky superhero guy? Not only is he Green Arrow, but he's also a good-looking hunk, this guy. So you think, boy, she must be overjoyed. But what happens is she says, look, I love you, but we don't need a piece of paper. I don't want to get married. It's just a piece of paper, and I don't want that. And as silly as this seems, we've seen a lot of this argument presented in a lot of TV, movie, radio throughout the years. And a couple weeks ago, my wife actually reminded me that years ago, I actually said that to her. So I fell for that propaganda. And now I was just thinking, to get off on a little side tangent here today, it occurred to me my son is about 8.5 months old now. And so he's been alive on the outside world longer than he was on the inside world of her body, because he was born at 8 months. He was born a little bit early. So he's actually been officially living, his life has been longer now outside, in this outside world, than it was when he was inside his mom's body. So he's just over 16 months old, essentially. So congratulations to me and congratulations to my wife and son. But marriage is very important, and really the only real reason to get married is for family purposes. If you're going to have kids, or maybe if you're going to remarry or whatever, and you want to somehow keep that family unit together and be the pillars of the family. But certainly for younger people, the only reason is to get married is to have kids. But my wife reminded me a couple years ago, and I didn't even remember this. So, hey, I fell for that propaganda, so it shows where I was at years ago. And if you're going to have kids, you want to do it under marriage. Because even though, as a guy, you have a lot to lose being married, and being married doesn't necessarily have a lot of benefit to the man, it certainly has benefit typically to the women. But the big thing is for your kids. If you're a parent, you want what's best for your kids. So certainly, I would want to be married to the mother of my children. So that's what's presented in that. So that's a whole segment there. And I'm like, what the heck? What happened to the Nazis? So then another commercial break. What happens after the commercial break? Well, now we're seeing kind of the morning after the party, where everyone's kind of waking up and they're hungover. And there's a scene where the one woman gets out of bed with the other woman. Apparently she got drunk, and maybe she's like, oh, I had this one night stand. So she gets out of bed with the one lesbian gets out of bed with the other. Keep in mind, this is a a show aimed at children, pretty much. That's a lot of their target demographic. Even 10 to 20 years ago, if I would have told people that this is presented on a Supergirl TV show, people wouldn't have believed me. It sounds so extreme. Like I said, I grew up watching in the early 90s the Superboy TV show, and that was just a good, wholesome superhero adventure show. Now we're getting into all this other stuff. So the one lesbian crawls out of bed, sneaks out while the other one's asleep, and then it cuts to they're outside the church because they're going to have the wedding. And the one that snuck out of bed with the other woman, she's now talking to Supergirl, and she's telling her, I had a one-night stand. And she's going, I feel kind of bad about this. I feel like a guy doing this. This is something guys do, and I'm like a guy now. And Supergirl just laughs and smiles and tells her, no, what you did is perfectly normal and healthy. You are a healthy girl. So that's the messaging in all this. And so then they go in for the wedding. All the superheroes are in the pews of the church. And the Flash, he's about to marry his black fiancée. And the minister or priest, whatever he is, doing the ceremony, he's going through the whole thing, talking about what a great couple they are. And right before they're about to get married, what happens? He gets hit with like some sort of laser, and he gets totally dissolved, vaporized, whatever, doesn't exist. And it turns out it was the Nazis. The Nazis showed up. And before they do battle, Supergirl makes a point to say, I hate Nazis. Now, what this means is actually very clear. They're not talking about literal Nazis from history, from 1930s, 40s Germany. Because what's a Nazi today? It's anyone that is probably a bit conservative, anyone that maybe has traditional beliefs, certainly like anyone that's white that wants to do what's best for them. All these other groups, they're okay with self-preservation, but if someone acting in their best interest, like when Obama was elected, a lot of blacks would just tell you, look, I voted for him because he's black. I want a black president that looks like me. But certainly a white person could never just say, yeah, I'm voting for this guy because he's white and we have something in common. So they do battle with the Nazis, and like I said, there's a lot of subtext to this. It's almost like they're saying this, hey, it's okay to go out and punch a Nazi, which anyone's a Nazi that's you or anyone that has any remotely traditional beliefs will be categorized. So it's almost, you could almost kind of read into it that the superheroes, because they have the Nazi superheroes too, but then the regular good superheroes, they're almost like Antifa, going out and doing battle, punching Nazis. You can read that into it. So I looked up a little bit more about this particular show. Let's take a look here. And this doesn't surprise me at all. So I see this headline. CW Supergirl ties Trump to Nazis with Make America Aryan Again slogan. I didn't see the whole episode, so I guess I missed this particular line, but it's in the show. Like you can see another article here. Same thing. Swipes at Trump with Nazi comparison, Make America Aryan Again. And what they're trying to say probably is that America was never Aryan, but as I pointed out, as someone, and I'm not into any kind of racial supremacy or anything like that, which is one reason I disagree with a lot of Protestants that have certain beliefs that I won't get into here. But I'm come from North Dakota originally, and I left at the end of the 1990s to go away to school. And now coming back, I haven't been back much over the years. Definitely the demographics have changed. And who really founded North Dakota and made North Dakota great? Well, Germans and Scandinavians. But also in our culture, we're also told that white people are, by our very nature, are racist. But I can prove for you here that that's not true. Because think about this, when I lived in North Dakota, it was almost only white people. Now you go there and you see a lot of blacks, you see a lot of Latinos. In fact, they're talking about how North Dakota has one of the fastest growing rates of Latino population. Now, if it were true that white people were so racist, these other people wouldn't be flocking to move there. But I have some good news for you. Before I end this video, I don't want you to think that this is very bleak and I'm just talking about problems. I want to give you guys something to learn and something to go away with. And really, I want to make you feel good ultimately. There is good news in all this. And the good news is that this type of propaganda, I think ultimately it's backfiring because they're coming so heavy-handed with everything. Like I say, when you see these relationships, they seem totally fake. Even if you don't know everything about the dynamics of how the world works, especially as a kid, their intended audience, it just, somehow you know it's not real. Kind of like if you've been watching Fast and the Furious and you see a CGI car fly through the air, somehow your brain knows that the physics of that is off. You don't know how to maybe verbalize it in words, but you know that there's something not right about that. It just doesn't look real. So ultimately, this heavy-handed propaganda, I think it's going to backfire, and it's really going to turn a lot of people off. Now, some people are going to fall for it, and like I said earlier, I fell for some of that, and I didn't even remember at one point I said to what's now my current wife, look, it's just a piece of paper. But keep in mind, back in my day, even though we had all the propaganda, it was easier to fall for because it wasn't as blatant and obvious and heavy-handed as it is now. And also, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have people putting out, like people like me or a lot of other good people on the internet. We didn't have them putting out their point of view and being able to laugh at it and point out just how silly everything is. So some people are going to fall for it, but a lot of people aren't. Even my niece, who I think is about to turn 11 years old here, my niece on my wife's side, she's about to turn 11 years old. She'd watched some episodes. She was telling me like a year ago that she watched some episodes of the show Supergirl, but even though she wanted to like it because it's this superhero and this female superhero that she should be related to, she didn't really like it. She didn't like I said, yeah, they have like a lesbian storyline I saw on that show. I was telling her, and she said, yeah, that's weird. That's, something about her, just even being a little kid, she's turned off by this. She finds it somehow unnatural, and this is just a little kid in elementary school, so even she can see through it. Like I said, the propaganda, of course, it's going to work on some people, especially really low IQ people that aren't capable of thinking on their own or having complex thoughts. But the good news is there's so many people that are going to be awakened by this and just be like, ugh, this isn't right. There's something that's off about this, and they're not going to fall for it. So I think ultimately, in some ways, they could be doing us a favor. But go ahead, leave your comments down below. This was a fun video, so check out some of my other videos, and go out and have a good day, too, in the real world.